Welcome to a Legendarium special about the history behind Alexandre Dumas's The Three Musketeers. In this episode, we will talk about the life of Alexandre Dumas and what led him to write one of the world's most beloved literary classics. Alexandre Dumas lived from 1802 to 1870 and was raised mainly by his mother. His father, a military officer who served during the French Revolution and then the Napoleonic Wars, died when Dumas was 4 years old. The family then fell out of favor with Napoleon, leaving young Dumas and his mother without means. They lived in the provinces, and Dumas received a little education from a local priest. At the age of 21, Dumas traveled to Paris to make his fortune. His first play was produced in 1829, and he began a successful career as a playwright and author. While in Paris, Dumas became a member of the Club des Hachachines, a group that met regularly in Paris to discuss literature and smoke hash. Other club members included Victor Hugo, Charles Baudelaire, and Honoré Balzac. Away from the literary scene, Dumas married actress Ida Ferrer in 1840, and they remained married until her death in 1849. He is believed to have had dozens of mistresses with whom he fathered at least 4 children. He acknowledged one of them, Alexandre Dumas Fils, at age 7 and took over his education. Dumas lived and worked during a time of political division and unrest as monarchists and republicans fought bitterly over what direction France should take. The exhaustion left by more than a generation of Napoleon's wars, which left 4 million dead across Europe, left many yearning for a simpler time. Perhaps that drew both Victor Hugo and Alexandre Dumas to historical fiction. Before writing The Three Musketeers, Dumas wrote novels about Robin Hood, King Louis XIV, and romances set in medieval France. He was inspired by a unit founded by King Henry IV in 1600 called the Musketeers in his most famous work. While films often depict musketeers fighting on foot with swords, King Henry's actual musketeers fought on horseback with long primitive guns called arquebuses. A generation later, King Louis XIII, who appeared in Dumas's novel, equipped them with muskets, hence their name. From the beginning, they comprised an elite unit drawn from aristocratic French families and manned by men as young as 16 years old. By the reign of Louis XIV, they included both infantry and cavalry units fighting with swords and muskets. By fighting in many battles during the 30 Years' War, the musketeers achieved legendary status. During peacetime, they served as a royal bodyguard and even staged mock, bloodless battles for the entertainment of the royal court. Curiously, many recruits came from Gascony, the same region where the hero D'Artagnan came from. The rivalry between the King's Musketeers and the Cardinal's Guards seen in the books also had historic roots. Cardinal Richelieu, who ruled France during the early years of King Louis XIII, sought to install his own flunkies as musketeer officers. This angered aristocratic families who traditionally could expect preferential treatment. Unsurprisingly, many duels erupted on the dirty streets of Paris between high-born musketeers and the Cardinal's Guards throughout the early 1600s. Unsurprisingly, Dumas first learned of a captain general of the King's Musketeers named D'Artagnan, who served during the 1650s, and he became the model for his hero. Being a good royalist, Dumas saw Cardinal Richelieu as a villain for taking the king's power and thus made him the antagonist of his story. Alexandre Dumas published The Three Musketeers in serial form in the newspaper Le Siècle between March and July 1844. D'Artagnan, the hero, travels from Paris with only a letter of recommendation to Captain Monsieur de Treville and his great skill with a sword. Soon he becomes brother-in-arms to 3 other musketeers, melancholy Athos, boisterous Porthos, and pious Aramis. Of course, they fight against the machinations of the wicked Cardinal Richelieu, even though historically Cardinal Richelieu and Louis XIII got along quite well and saw the duels between their followers as great sport. Nonetheless, the book became so popular during the summer of 1844 that readers lined up around the street to buy the next edition of the newspaper. It became so popular that Dumas returned to his Musketeers. Beginning in 1847, he published a sequel set 10 years later called The Vicomte of Bragelonne. This is most famous for its third act, which tells the story of the Man in the Iron Mask in chapters 181 through 269. He also published another Musketeer novel called 20 Years Later, which tells of D'Artagnan and his friends trying to protect the young King Louis XIV during the Fronde Rebellion. As he grew older, Dumas's opulent lifestyle sank him into greater and greater debt. By the time of his death in 1870, he lay at the mercy of his creditors. Per his own wishes, Dumas was laid to rest in his hometown of Villers-Cotterets. Yet his legacy lives on. If you take the Paris Metro Line 2, you might end up at Alexandre Dumas Station, located under the Boulevard des Charons. Altogether, there have been over 50 film and television adaptations of the Three Musketeers, beginning with a 1903 silent film, and most recently it has been made into a 2014 BBC series. D'Artagnan has been played by Douglas Fairbanks, Gene Kelly, Michael York, Chris O'Donnell, and Louis Pasqualino, to name a few. In 2002, French President Jacques Chirac had Dumas's remains exhumed and brought to Paris, protected by Republican guards dressed as musketeers. In a televised ceremony, he interred Dumas in the mausoleum at the Pantheon. Chirac gave a speech acknowledging France's racist past and gave Dumas his rightful place in the great French literary canon, the top. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.